This is Will Tchakirides interviewing Danise Jones-Dorsey for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 1:25 p.m. on December 4th, 2025, and this interview is being recorded at WEAA FM 88.9 in Baltimore, Maryland. How are you doing today, Miss Jones-Dorsey?
I am doing well. You may certainly for this interview call me Danise.
Thank you, Danise.
And I'm doing well and excited to do this interview.
Let me start here. I'm going to have you just state your full name for the historical record and just tell me what your relationship is to this radio station, WEAA.
I am Danise Jones-Dorsey, and my relationship to this WEAA radio station is very simple. I am a listener and a patron.
How long have you been listening to this radio station?
I have been listening to this radio station since its inception, and I will tell you in a moment how that all happened.
I'm excited to get there. But let me first start by asking you, where do you come from? So, when were you born, if you don't mind saying, and where were you living when you were born?
Okay. I'm excited to share that I was born in 1952. And I was born in Louisville, Kentucky.
Now, let's say this is the movie of Danise's life. Paint a picture for me. If I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I hear at the time when you were growing up?
Wow. I grew up in what's known as the West End of Louisville. It's a segregated community, but my neighborhood was filled with sounds, with commerce, with people moving about their daily living. There's homemakers, there are men working, there's shift work going on, all three shifts. My school is nearby, Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic School. There are children playing. There's a library that became my haven. But there's also, again, commerce. And one of the places were these meeting places known as beer gardens or lounges. And I would see who I call the big people dressed to kill, going to these places very happy, exchanging conversation, telling stories, handling business. Those are the things that I saw in Louisville growing up. But what's key here is that I saw self-determined, self-reliant people in the community. I also saw housing, the GI Bill housing, and many of the men that I knew embrace their GI Bill. So the story is that the men that I knew, the adult men, because I'm still a little girl, they all had served our country proudly and was eligible for the GI Bill, and they took advantage of it, purchasing homes, securing government paid positions, or continuing their education. So that's what I saw. In addition to that, public housing had just been constructed. They're known as the Carter homes. They're no longer there. But at that time, brand new, safe, decent housing for working families. Those are the things that I saw.
Thanks for sharing that. Talk to me a little bit about the institutional life of your community in Louisville, whether that's the churches or the church you attended, organizations, maybe at school or parent-teacher committees, maybe civil rights organizations. What institutions stick out in Louisville?
Okay, a lot of them. Louisville is definitely a place in the Midwest where there's a lot of innovation and thinking. And again, in 1952, Louisville is segregated. So by 1958, it's still segregated, but there's a new energy going on in the country as it relates to civil rights. The institutions that I was aware of, and it was the whole gamut. Was a very precocious little girl. The churches, the pastoral leaders, whether it was the Protestant churches or the Catholic churches, all of these leaders, their focus was on the uplifting of the members of their congregation uplifting the communities where they resided, supporting the businesses that supported them. So that was very exciting for me. I can even drill a little deeper. Quinn Chapel was an African Methodist Episcopal church, major leader in the AME movement, and they definitely promoted self-determination through good education. So they were really interested in higher education for African Americans. And the AME movement, for instance, has Waters College, University. You may have visited that already. The Progressive Baptist movement, so New Zion Baptist Church, which was my family's church, was very, again, interested in supporting folks achieving their goals and their missions, but to be self-reliant, to value the dignity of the individual. And how could church, through its activities, support uplifting folks and their dignity? And then, of course, my church was Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic Church at the time. It became West End Catholic later on. But I later learned that it was a mission of the Catholic Church, and it was an Indian and Negro mission. But again, everyone who was connected with this parish were very interested in uplifting our people through education. And one of the strong suits of Catholic education is critical thinking. So from the very onset, I was taught to think critically about everything that was going on around me. So even as a little girl, I'm really assessing all the time what's going on. So that's the church. I then crosswalked into the educational component. I knew that children attended Jefferson County Public Schools. DeVal was one of those schools in my neighborhood. But my father was who believed that education was the pathway to equality, felt that the segregated school system did not provide all of the things that he wanted me to have. Two things he did. Kindergarten was experimental then. He made sure that I attended kindergarten, and then he made sure that I attended Immaculate Heart of Mary school, and he bartered money and labor to ensure that the tuition was paid so I could attend the school. Okay, so that's education as I understood it at the time. Then the economic institution. What was going on economically? I learned very quickly that in segregated Louisville, there were all of these flourishing black businesses. And it's documented. There's some books I can let you know about later on to share that with you. But these black businesses flourished, and they took the entire gamut. Black-owned supermarkets, black-owned mortuaries, black-owned cleaners, black attorneys, physicians. So in my world as a little girl, African Americans could achieve and were achieving everything. So that's what I saw. So that was one of the strengths of segregation.
Yeah, well, I actually want to keep talking about this because it's a common theme in this project as we've been conducting these oral histories was power, self-reliance, self-determination, these ideas you're speaking to during a time of segregation and a sense of something being lost with integration. And yeah, I understand it's about resources. It's about fair and equal resources, right? But what is lost when you have a self-reliant community and certain laws are put in place and the right way to say this, right? Institutions integrate, but all of a sudden there is no longer that sort of insular economy or institutional network. What happens when integration comes to a place like Louisville for this self-reliant black community?
As I understand the question, what are the changes that occur when you desegregate? And I want to pause here for a moment because I do want to make sure our listeners know that the civil rights movement did not call for integration. It called for desegregation,
right?
Meaning that certain kind of walls dropped. It was as simple as that.
Right.
That was it. So the power balance as it relates to desegregation definitely dropped because you're no longer controlling your own destiny. Someone else, you're part of a larger institution and someone else is controlling the destiny. And the person is going to control the destiny in their interests. So those are the things that were lost. The main thing that was lost was the value towards, I can do this for myself. The dependency of becoming dependent and saying, oh, I need this help. I cannot do this. So that's what I saw lost. I remain very committed to, as we're hordes of people, to self-determination. And we'll talk about that in WEAA in a moment. But the other thing that I definitely want to share with you is, of course, I said that I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. I grew up at 32nd and Young. Ali grew up at 32nd and Grant. And because we had this strong sense of community, and we all in the West End, in Parkland was a neighborhood in the West End, we all socialized. So my parents and Ali's parents were pals and friends. And those beer gardens and pubs that I talked about, folks would see each other in these places. In fact, my uncle operated one of those beer gardens and pubs very successfully. But so the story is, too, Ali is 10 years older than I am. So Ali becomes my big brother. So he's 18. He's hanging out with my cousins. I'm 8. But the guys are always looking out for the little ones and sharing, you can't do this, you can do this, and so on and so forth. So my and I didn't even recognize Ali as being famous. I recognized him as being a gentle giant, and I loved that. But I also knew, so going to his father, for whom he was named, his father was a very proud African-American man as well, and his father was a painter, and he painted images in churches. And the images that he painted, Jesus was an African-American. And I'm like, wow. So again, that even says to me that God, and it says in the Word of God, we were created in God's image, male and female. And I'm like, wow, God is in my genes. I'm in his genes, so on and so forth. So that fueled my sense of, we can do this.
It was affirming,
but in a very powerful way, regardless of the obstacles that you are going to encounter. With enough energy, enough passion, enough smarts, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
So those are the values and attitudes that I personally grew up with. That was taught to me by my community and reinforced by my community.
And I'm so glad you mentioned Muhammad Ali, because you're actually not the first person in this project to talk about Muhammad Ali. And we've also interviewed some folks from Louisville as well, an alumni at Fisk University named Danise Sanders. As well, and shared a story about this community, this really special community. Tell me about, you mentioned your father. Tell me about the people who raised you. What was their background? What did they do for work, and where did they come from?
All right. Okay, now I'm getting real excited. Well, let me first tell you about Robert Frank Hampton Jones. All 4 names are important, and he carried all 4 names his entire life. He grew up in Grenada, Mississippi. And of course, he was born in 1917. So he definitely grew up in that era of Jim Crow. He also grew up in that era of lynching. But what's so interesting about lives of people, the majority of the time, you're just operating your life in a very normal manner. It's not that you're under this hammer 24/7, but when the hammer strikes, of course, it's very frightening, very scary, and so on and so forth. Robert Frank Hampton Jones grew up with his maternal grandmother, Miss Peacock, and She was an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur. And one of the things that he talked about was in her era, she had the Cadillac of the era. She had her Surrey with the fringe on top. And I was just so fascinated with this story. She also believed in working hard, being productive, but being committed to the future. What are the new trends? What's going on? What can we be involved in? And that she passed that on to my father. So my father works hard, but he's also intrigued with what's going on around him. And in those days, he actually was an usher in the movie theater. So not only was he getting paid to perform that work, he's seeing those films, new ideas, new concepts, stories, and so on and so forth. So this is very exciting. Daddy was committed to education, as I mentioned earlier, for himself as well. So Daddy continued to his education and actually attained a high school diploma, which for that epoch was rare because most people dropped out of school at 16 to start working in industry. But he was clear that if he did that and didn't have the high school diploma, he was not on an even keel with other folks applying for the same job. So he was able to present his high school diploma. Well, as time goes on, World War II approaches, and Daddy becomes a member of the Army, United States Army. But Daddy was not interested in taking life. So he joined the Medic Corps. He wanted to pursue life and address life. Prior to his getting into the war, however, he could not grow financially or otherwise in Grenada, Mississippi. So Daddy actually walked from Grenada, Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee in search of opportunity. And so he goes to the big city, Memphis, Tennessee, and there's a whole story with that. But I want to go back to him being a part of the World War II. Mm-hmm. This was a tradition for him as well because my grandfather, whose name was King Jones, very deliberate because his family did not want him to be disrespected. So they named him King, so you would have to say King. Was in World War I. And when you see their pictures side by side, the only way you can tell the difference is the uniform. So I'm clear that there's these brave men in my world who fought wars versus some of the images that I was seeing in movies. So Robert F.H. Jones goes to the Pacific Theater. He also plays around with photography, so he loves taking pictures. But in the Pacific Theater, needless to say, there was all kind of carnage, but there was also sickness because the United States Army at that time was not prepared for guerrilla or jungle warfare. And this is the story that he told me that I would love to share with you. There is an occasion, as the medic, he's with the physician, who more than likely was white, because if he was black, he would have told me. So more than likely was white, overworked, and addressing the needs of the GIs who had fallen for whatever reason. There is a young, white, redhead GI laying on a litter, and the doctor has determined that he has gangrene as a result of the GI issue, and that uniform was not appropriate for that theater because of humidity and all of that. But the doctor wants to take a look at this infestation and really figure out how to treat it if they can treat it. So the doctor speaks with the young man, and then he says, Jonesy, I need you to cut the boot, open up the legs, let's clean this up so I can take a look at that. The young white male, redhead, on the litter, in his southern drawl, says that he did not want any inward touching him. And I am like, oh, Daddy, he called you that horrible word. What did you do? My father, in his very poised and staid and thoughtful response to his little wide-eyed daughter, said, I looked at this young man and I said to him, well, young man, it's your choice. I can either open those pants, cut this boot, dress this wound, or in your false pride, you can lie here and your leg could be amputated because this wound has not been treated. Daddy said that the young man dropped his head, eyes rolled back. A big tear came down his eye and his cheek. And he relented and said to my father, cut it open. And so I was like, Daddy, wow. And so, of course, my question is, what was the lesson? Because he would always say to me, what did you learn, Danise? And I said to him, so what was the lesson? And he said to me, poise and intelligence and grace wheels out over stupidness every day.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Daddy, stop it.
Truth.
So that is Robert Frank Hampton Jones. The other thing that I want to share is there are 7 of us. He worked hard to provide for his wife, Elizabeth Jones, my mother, and all of the little chicks. And if he had to take on 3 jobs, he did. If he had to walk early to work, in fact, when we started going to school, he would give us the quarter, would give me the quarter that he would have used to ride the bus to get out to the construction site. He would walk, and he would instruct me, with this quarter, I want you to purchase milk for you and your siblings at school, and I want you all to have your milk every day, along with the lunch that your mama has prepared for you. That's Robert Frank Hampton Jones. Well, the other thing that I learned was that Daddy was a community organizer. But I didn't learn that until I was an adult. And that he was constantly advocating for justice as it relates to operations. So zoning justice, electricity justice, job justice. He also became a union organizer, which was a real feat because the segregated South is also a right-to-work South.
That's right.
And he organized, he was a labor union organizer. So I learned these things about my father, but he did all of this with quiet and fanfare.
Which union? Oh, which union?
I'm not sure the name of the union, but I can tell you it could have been rail workers because he worked for L&N, but he also worked for E.I. DuPont and International Harvester. So I'm thinking it's more
mechanical.
Those. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes. So, but he also was very future-oriented, and what he did was there was an opportunity for folks to take a test, a federal test, and apply for a government position. Daddy took the test as a GI. So Daddy took the test, and it turns out that he passed and that he received a job offer to come to Andrews Air Force Base in Prince George's County, Maryland, to work as a boiler fireman. He accepted the risk. And so in a moment, we'll talk about how did I get to Maryland.
But your mother's side, I would love to hear about her story.
My mother, bless her heart, first of all, she's a beauty. She's an absolute beauty. Long hair, very fair complected. A young girl who left Commerce, Georgia. So she was born in Commerce, Georgia, to a family who were sharecroppers. However, her grandmother, her maternal grandmother and father owned a lake. So people would come to their lake, stay in the cabins, and fish. So there's this entrepreneurial component as well in the family. Again, my grandfather was a sharecropper. My grandmother, his wife, she had contracted polio about when she was a young girl, and so she was stricken with polio and therefore could not walk. But she, undaunted, she continued to work as well. So she did laundry for folks. She took care of the home. My mother described how she would pull herself around on her, arms and hands in order to do the work she needed to do, although she has a wheelchair. And again, this family is very, very proud of who they are and their history and so on and so forth. In fact, let me share this with you.
Mm-hmm.
The great Thurgood Marshall is going around the country also raising money to do the work that he does. And he comes to Commerce, Georgia. And one of the persons that, of course, he's going to encounter are the entrepreneurs, the folks who may have money. And so my great-grandparents are a part of this group. So there's a family picture of them all with Thurgood Marshall. And he's explaining what's going on and seeking their support and so on and so forth. And he gets their support with financial support as well. So my mother, again, she's the youngest. She's a beauty. She does work as a domestic for the judge of the community, Judge Varner. And so she learns all of the social graces as well, and she shares all of that with me. Now, her goal, her dream was to have a beautiful home, a wonderful husband, great kids. And so and she's still alive, she's 93, almost 94. She was able to live that dream with grace, with verve, with laughter, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so that's my mother. Okay, yes.
Wow. You're bearing witness to a lot of strength and resiliency from Black women, from Black men, the stories of wartime service, the lessons you're learning. It's no surprise to me that you enter a world of social service, of service to your community, of community organizing, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. But tell me, how old are you when the family relocates to Prince George County?
12.
Okay.
And that's a major pivotal point for me.
So do tell me, what are the differences you notice? What do you see in Prince George County, and what feels different about it from Louisville? And then take me into your high school years and what you're experiencing.
Okay, thank you for this. So what happens is that I'm excited to go to Prince George's County, Maryland, because I'm thinking everything's going to be new. The newness was exciting for me. Now, nobody told me this, but this was what was in my head. We come to Prince George's County in June of 1964. So a lot has gone on socially as well. Mm-hmm. Everything from Jack Kennedy's assassination to the Beatles coming to America. And I'm aware of all of this because television and radio is a constant in my home. So even though many people had not gotten televisions yet, the Jones family had television. The Jones family had radio because those things were very important to my father. When it was time to get a personal computer, Daddy had one. But here's what happened. So I need to tell you the story first before I tell you what I saw. Daddy was working at Andrews for 3 years.
The Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm, Air Force Base. He lived at the YMCA. And so he saved money. He lived in an environment that was a moral and ethical environment from his perspective, right, or whatever. And he's raising money because in his head, he's not going to get apartments or anything like that. He wants to purchase his second home because the house we lived in Louisville, he was buying that house. Okay, so this is deep. So he wants to purchase his second home. When it's time for him to begin to shop for a home, and he knew what he wanted to get. He wanted to get my mother the suburban, split-level house with grass and all that, because she's a gardener. She really does have a green thumb to die for. Mm. And he's getting advice to where to look for a house. He was advised to go to Palmer Park, Maryland, the same community where Sugar Ray Leonard hails from.
Another fighter.
Yeah. This gets to be too deep. So, when he goes to Palmer Park, which at that time was a white working class community, he is told, "You cannot live here. But you seem to be a nice man. May we suggest that you go just 1 mile up the road," which is true, to a little town called Glenarden, Maryland. So significant. So he does. And he buys that house that my mother is still living in. And when friends and associates go with me home, they are in awe that I grew up in this house and in this neighborhood. Glenarden is an all-black town. It's incorporated. At the time, it had just under 2,000 residents. It's now hovering around 6,000. In Glenarden, the carbon copy of what I experienced in Louisville was happening in Glenarden. African American adults from all walks of life wanting to have provide a positive environment for their children inside of segregated and overtly racist Prince George's County. So I'm now growing up in a neighborhood with people like Senator Tommy Broadwater, Mr. Fletcher, who was my godfather. I had 2 godfathers, I'm blessed. Mr. Herbert Flowers, where the high school is named for him, was a Tuskegee Airman who was working at Goddard Space Flight Center. These guys are my godfathers. They are organizing all of We Children, and I'm actively involved in that. We had the maitre d' for the White House, Mr. Bell, right down the street. Ms. Bell eventually becomes the head of the writing pool for the White House. These are the folks that, I'm around. Dr. Wise, African American, great tradition and familiar. He's the doctor for the community. Dr. Trice is the dentist. So I'm around all of these kinds of folks. Decatur Trotter, who became senator. So I'm with all of these folks, and the women community leaders as well as the men community leaders. So again, it's being reinforced in my mind: self-determination, self-reliance, justice, fairness. Okay. I unlearned the term, though, equality, because Mr. Hill points out to me, you can't be equal if you didn't start out equal. So what you really are interested in is efficacy. And I'm like, woo, new stuff. So the neighborhood looks like any other pristine suburban neighborhood. So I'm like, I died and gone to heaven. Clean streets, children all over the place. And our block was called Carker Avenue, and to this day, all of us who grew up on Carker Avenue, we come together and talk about our experience. And those people would be like Delegate Andrea Harrison, who's from Carker Avenue, myself, Diane Bell McCoy, who is the retired president and CEO for Associated Black Charities, who's my best friend. Folks like Dr. Sheila Walker, who's now deceased, but was one of the early African-American physicians educated at the University of Maryland and had her practice until she died. So these are the things that I saw in Glenarden. But it wasn't always stilted. We had fun. We had teen club. We danced to the Temptations. I swooned to the Miracles. I loved the Choice 4 in D.C. I had an opportunity to go to WOOK television station, African American owned, to see the folks that I was crazy about, like James Brown. So all of these kinds of things are happening. Marvin Gaye's home is in Sea Pleasant, on the other side of Sea Pleasant, not far away. Could be a part of that. So as time goes on, so now we're going to crosswalk to my high school years. Let's start with junior high. So I'm now from Louisville, coming to Prince George's County, ready to start the 7th grade. And Daddy goes to the public school, you know, because Daddy is the one who handles all the business. Okay. We go to the public school, and they tell him that he's telling them how bright I am. He's showing the report card and so on and so forth. And they're telling him, well, we'll have to test her. We're not sure that she will meet the grade of our students because she is coming from the South. Although Maryland's not in the South or whatever. But she is coming from the South, and they're a little backwards and so on and so forth. So Daddy was dejected. He came home and told me what had happened, and he lamented the fact that when the sisters had asked him to skip me a grade, he declined. Now he's saying, maybe I should have done that, and then you would have been so on and so forth. And I say to him as a child, no, you probably did the right thing. Somehow I knew that academic and social achievement really should go hand in hand. That being super smart but having a low social IQ because you haven't lived long enough and gone through could be a detriment. Well, I go to Kent Junior High School in segregated Prince George's County because they also were saying, well, you know, the school that she should be going to is this black school. And Daddy was like, no, I want her to have the same education that the white students are getting. That's what's going on in his head. Okay. So, go to the school. I'm in the sections are the highest to the lowest. So I'm in the second section. So instead of being in 7-2, I'm in 7-4. Well, folks is having a heart attack because Danise is in there going through like great gangbusters. And the reason why Danise was going through like gangbusters is two, retrospectively. One, I had developed critical thinking skills so I could figure it out. But the other thing is that they were teaching me what I already had. So let me tell you, I'm so proud of this. Couple of things. I learned how to read phonetically, so I didn't learn how to read by rote and have to commend all of this information to memory. I was able to do word attack immediately and could even figure out what that word meant. And also when I was reading, I learned how to read in context. So if the story is saying this, if we're talking about a door and this is a Zuda Phi Buddha, then this must be a key. I was able to do that. The other thing was, so I learned that. The other thing that happened was, so I learned how to read phonetically. I also was reading on an college level at that point. And I also had at Catholic school what was called modern math. It's really algebra. But I knew how to do word problems real easy. So I've had all this preparation. And then when they were doing history, world history, I already had that, but that was part of my religious education because I needed to understand geography and world history to figure out how the Catholic Church got here to begin with. But I was also very polite. Remember the lesson my father taught me. So I knew that just go with the flow, Danise, do what you're doing. Although I did, I did seek opportunities to learn more, to get more work from the teacher, so that I could do what I needed to do. So the next year, I'm now in 8. They changed it to the odd number, so I'm now in 8-1, the top class. So enjoyed my junior high school years, did everything that all folks do, except there was one thing that happened. This is the first time I'm called the N-word. And unlike the poise that my father had, I took that little boy and beat his ass. As simple as that. Of course, I had to go to confession to apologize for doing all of this. But that's what happened. So that was my first experience ever being called the N-word. So we move on to high school.
Yeah.
So I go to high school in 1968. So the larger context is very, very tumultuous. And I've been very interested in what was going on in the world socially and civilly all along. So I had the opportunity to understand the challenges around desegregating schools and the buses and so on and so forth. Now, I have to tell your audience, somehow my experience of going to Kent Junior High School taught me that sitting beside a white child in school did not necessarily mean that I was going to be intelligent. Somehow I figured that out. The other image was that I figured out that white people had all different kinds of needs and came in all different kinds of hues and so on and so forth. So the images that I was seeing on television, Ricky Nelson was not in my school. Okay, so I'm beginning to get a real sense of these folks are human people as well, with various degrees of challenges, opportunities, intellect, so on and so forth. Because of church, I also was able to be charitable, patient, humane with other people, okay, in spite of the ugliness that I may have encountered. So, but still, I was like, okay, we're going to do this desegregation thing. So I'm now going to be attending DeVal High School, which at that time was the -- high school in the county. So I'm ready, I'm on it, so on and so forth. So that year, 68, it was voluntary.
Voluntary busing.
Right. 69 is when it becomes mandatory. But at 68, I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm going to the school. I'm getting to meet people. I'm meeting the teachers and working with them. And they're working with me. The second year, when the busing became mandatory, and this is before computers and all this stuff, and I'm working with Ms. Beveridge, who was my high school vice principal during the summer. One of the challenges was that parents were like, I do not want my child in a classroom where the teacher is inferior, and so on and so forth. Well, it made sense to me. But again, I'm quiet, but I learned something about structural racism. What I learned was that in segregated Prince George's County public schools, if you are a white teacher, you could get a job teaching full salary with an AA degree. Your promotion would be based on your getting, your BS degree and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But if you were an African American teacher and you wanted to teach, you had to have a BS degree. And if you wanted to get tenured, to get additional pay and all that, you had to have your master's degree. And if you wanted a leadership role, you had to have your PhD before the county would even consider this. So now I knew that. The reason why I mentioned no computers, because folks had to go from classroom to classroom, but no pictures were on the doors. You saw the teacher's bio sketch, you saw their credentials, and so on and so forth. And so parents, of course, were selecting people with the higher credentials. And so I realized, critical thinking, I'm like, Miss Beveridge, do you realize that? And she smiled. She had a little twinkle in her eye, and she smiled, and she said, Danise, it's okay. This is going to be a major lesson. And because I had this theme about what is the lesson, I decided to be quiet. First day of school comes, and I'm one of the student people who's excited and welcoming and so on and so forth. And parents are very disturbed, and they're coming to the school with their children because they want to meet the homeroom teachers, see the teachers, and so on and so forth. Well, you would have thought World War III had just occurred, because when the parents are going to these classrooms, they are now in shock because they never envisioned that the teacher would be African American. They'd never envisioned that in a million years. So they were trying to deal with this disconnect that was going on in their own world. They did settle down because what Miss Beveridge was able to do was to share with parents who were coming to her with their concerns. I mean, the lines were just long. She was able to say that, well, let's give it a week or two and then come back to me because I can't, there's a lot of requests for shifting. Let's give it a week or two and see how it works. Well, of course, she was smart. When the week or two occurred, only one or two parents literally wanted to make the change because everything was, going along just so well for their students. So again, this is the high school environment. But there's other things that's going on in the high school. Prejudice around the sports. Who's playing the sports? Who can be cheerleaders? Other extracurriculum classes. And so I become very concerned about those issues. And I become a student leader, trying to persuade, other students, we really need to rethink this. Like Sheila, you have a lovely voice. This young woman who got the lead, her voice in nowhere compares to yours. We should fight that. Sheila said no. But that's the kind of stuff that I was concerned about. But there were other students who were like, yeah, we need to do this. And this is inside what's going on nationally in the world.
Well, let's set that context, right? Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in 1968 in April. Mm-hmm. Lyndon Johnson and the federal government, they passed the Fair Housing Act in 1968, the Civil Rights Act, which is going to play a big role in the work that you do to come. We have 1968 Paris and what is happening over there, the Prague Spring. There's a lot happening globally. The Vietnam War is in full speed, and U.S. involvement is full speed ahead. Muhammad Ali, right, is refusing that draft call and paying a consequence for it.
Absolutely. The Robert F. Kennedy is also assassinated.
Kennedy's assassinated. So, yeah, just continue to talk a little bit about this early moment where you're developing an activist orientation. You're actually doing some community organizing right here in the school for issues you care about. And continue to square that with the national politics. How are you operating? What happens next in your efforts to start organizing students for various causes?
Okay, so what happens is, in D.C., so I want to go local and then a little regional. In the District of Columbia, they're also fighting for being able to represent themselves. Because at that point, the D.C. government, Julius Hobson, is advocating for home rule. So there's this home rule component going on. I'm very interested in home rule, the home rule issues. And I'm become aware of it because WOOK, Black-owned radio station, WOL, Kathy Hughes is a part of the station. She hasn't bought it yet. But they are sharing in the conversation, in the news coverage, what's going on with education. That's me. So what's going on with home rule through their news coverage. So I become aware of these things, and they have a satirist. His name is Petey Green, who I totally become totally taken with and loving hearing his satire. As a result of this, I become involved with Marion Barry, who's an organizer at that point, Petey Green, what was Doug's name? Doug was also a minister. And I become involved with these men, aware of the issues that they're working on. How are they working on all of these issues? So in fact, my mother brags about it, she loves it, that eventually I brought these and other people home. She's the homemaker, consummate. And they're having cornbread at her table, good bean soup, good greens, and Southern fried chicken. So this is the world that I'm a part of. And I'm like, I want to do these things here at, my school. I'm very interested. But what I also learn is that the issues, the challenges that we face at DeVal as a result of forced busing was being experienced by other African American students at other schools. Wayne Curry, the first African American county executive, attended Bladensburg High School while I was at Duval High School. And we became pals. And so there's this regional effort, and because of all of this consternation that's going on in the schools, because now students across the county, African American students and supportive white students, are walking out. So we're having walkouts. And the county is like, oh my God, we got to figure this out. So we actually participated in a regional conference, 2 of them. One was at the University of Maryland, College Park. The other one, they took us to a retreat in West Virginia, where students across the lines began to talk about their concerns, their differences, and not just from one point of view. You know, these were students who had one point of view and students who had another point of view. It may have been and athletes who were leaders. We're all a part of this, and I emerged as a major leader and a person who's able to achieve the compromise.
Does a specific organization come out of this effort?
It did not. We continue to be, we continue to work collaboratively. But my goal was, and still is not, my goal then and still to this day, I'm never interested in forming this mega group because that's fraught with issues. Mm-hmm. But I'm always interested in where we have shared interests, let's do the deal right there, so that other things don't distract you from getting into the shared interests. You follow? So we worked collaboratively. But again, out of this effort, major leaders emerge, like a Wayne Curry, who becomes an attorney, becomes a county exec. You know, it's just, so those are the things that's going on. Now, my high school years, though, it was not all protests. You know, I'm now swinging to the latest music. I love to dance. We're dating. We're having all those kinds of issues and challenges. All of that is happening. So I'm having a hallmark childhood that's laced with all this other interesting and exciting drama.
Joy and struggle at the same time.
I love that. I'm going to use that. Joy and struggle, yes.
Are you listening to the radio? Are there particular stations? You've mentioned a couple, but some other music stations. How important is listening to the radio in your life at this young age?
Okay, it's extremely important for several reasons. One, culturally, I wanted to hear my music. So I wanted to hear gospel. I wanted to hear blues. I wanted to hear rhythm and blues. I wanted to hear those iterations of that music. Now, I do like country music too, but I could go to another station to get that. But I'm also interested in the news, because here's what I learned very early on. Whoever controls the narrative controls the story. And that narrative may not reflect the perspective that you hold dear because of your experiences. So I'm listen, honey. I convinced my parents I had a bookcase bed. My sister and I, we slept together in our bedroom. We each had our own bedroom, shared bedrooms. And we had a book, our headboard was a bookcase. So reading is also extremely important to me. So my books are there, but the radio is there. And we are listening to WOL until Daddy says, turn the radio off. So we're listening to WOL radio, enjoying the music, enjoying the commentary, enjoying the interplay, participating in the contests that they have on the radio, you know, for the kids, teenagers and that kind of thing. Radio is extremely important. It's also important because as I'm performing my chores, radio's on. So I'm listening to the music, and performing my chores suddenly becomes easier. I can drift into the music as I'm doing what I'm doing. Yes.
Okay. Let's keep it moving. So what do you do after high school?
After high school, I attend the University of Maryland, College Park. Guess what? Same drama, different day. But here's what was interesting is that College Park had been desegregated, so there were strong groups on campus like CORE when I got there in 1970. But there were also a lot of deep thinkers. They had just formed the African American department.
Yeah. So Black Studies has come to University of Maryland.
Black Studies has come to the University of Maryland. And as a part of self-determination, we decided that SGA was okay, Student Government Association, but we formed, and I became the treasurer for the Black Student Union. Okay, so let me tell you these stories. But Black Studies comes to the University of Maryland, and there are major folks there like Troy King, Meldon Hollis, and Dr. Mary Frances Berry is the dean who eventually becomes the provost. And Danise is exposed to a different way of thinking in a very, different way. I go there talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald and his challenges, and folks are like, well, what about Richard Wright? Have you read him? What do you think about Langston Hughes? So this whole new world, or Chinua Achebe, because it's Black Studies, Kwame Nkrumah, what do you think about all of this? Dr. Walter Rodney. So I'm like, wow. Because of how I came to the university from Duval and did the normal stuff, so on and so forth, rather than being recruited, I was not aware of the supports that were being offered to African American students through Mburu, but I eventually became aware of the students who participated in that. So it was two things. Mburu provided an opportunity for cultural expression and so on and so forth. Also, it was a safety net if you were having difficulty communicating with professors and peers and so on and so forth. And it provided you with academic support so that you could successfully transition into what was expected in the routine and so on and so forth. Because I attended Duval High School, and it turns out that my four girls were still all together to this day. We all entered into the University of Maryland the exact same way. And so we didn't know about these opportunities. We eventually learned about them, although we did not participate in terms of academic supports and all of that. But what I did participate in was the Black Student Union, because I wanted to make sure governmentally that African American students were getting what they desire. Because one of my major paradigms is, okay, we got the concept, but what does it look like operationally? What does it look like on the ground? Let me tell you. Ooh, I have to pause myself. At this point, my name changes, and I'm now known as Tish, which is the shortening of my African name. I had the ceremony, Tishabu. So Tish is now Black Student Union. I'm the treasurer. And of course, you got to raise money. We have a newspaper. We have a space where students can come and hang out in addition to Mburu. And we wanted to raise money for the students, because what we learned is that the African American students did not necessarily have all the money that they needed to go to school. So they may have had a scholarship to cover their tuition, but they did not have the money that they needed for housing, transportation, food, books. So we got the bright idea to have a fundraiser, which we were allowed to do. Bottom line is, we met with the promoter, and we brought Isaac Hayes, who was actually I did two. We brought the Jackson 5, who was hot. And we brought Isaac Hayes. The goal was that the proceeds from this concerts was going to be used to create a book fund for the African American students so they could buy their books early. Because what was happening was they had to wait for money. By the time they were ready to buy the books were gone, classes are still going on, you're behind in the whole bit. So we was like, no, we're going to buy the books as soon as you register. I will tell you the Isaac Hayes story, because this is when I get in trouble with the chancellor.
Please do.
We did the Isaac Hayes concert. The promoter is meeting with the executive committee of the Black Student Union and is making his offer. And he's saying, Mr. Hayes is going to sell this out. We just need to have we cannot access the Cofield House except through a student group. So we want to come to you. And in accessing it, what we would do is we would share with you 40% of the, the proceeds. Critical thinking again, and God. For whatever reason, Danny said, this is so exciting, but let's talk about these terms differently. Saving time. The terms was that the Black Student Union would definitely give access, but we're going to share the overhead costs. So we're going to share the costs of the rental for the Cofield House, security, the printing of the tickets, all of those overheads. We will share the costs, and then we'd be more than happy to do the 60-40 split, because you're talking about a different split.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. And so the guy was like, he tried to talk us around it. And once he started to try to talk us out of it, I said, Danise, damn, you hit it. This is how we're going to do this. So we did our we did the contract. It was done in this way. So that meant that that both entities was assuming the burden shared. It was 50% each. We would share the burden, and then the profit that was left out of that, then we would split that 60-40. I was okay with that. Concert occurred. It was absolutely amazing. The promoter was absolutely correct. It was sold out, absolutely sold out. I was invited to the stage to join Mr. Hayes, and he was so impressed with what we were doing. And he asked, would we accept a $5,000 gift for him for the book fund, which we absolutely did. Girlfriend definitely accepted it, and that happened in the fall. So I'm like, okay, so everything will be done, and by the time we get to the winter semester, we're ready to rock and roll. $5,000 is deposited in the account. I'm now waiting. Students are now starting to register for the winter semester, and I'm waiting for the release of the funds. The university would not release the funds. Now, all the due diligence and everything was done. And I asked our student advisor, why the funds haven't been, what's going on? And he said, well, this is the decision of the chancellor whether or not he's going to release the funds. I said, what? And I said, and all of this is in writing, correct? Yes, everything's in writing, everything was inked. This is our relationship, so on and so forth. So I shared with the executive committee, we're going to have a meeting with the chancellor. So we requested the meeting with the chancellor. The executive committee was going in, but I had also organized, along with the executive committee members, that all of the other students, y'all come over to that building and sit on those damn steps until we come out. And this is consistent with what was going on around the country in terms of demonstrations.
Yeah,
right?
it's an era of student campus protest.
Yes. And so, but even the process I'm describing is what folks were doing at USC, Harvard. This is the same things going on.
Yeah.
All right. We go in to meet the chancellor, and I said, you know what, critical thinking skills. We go into the room, it's a long table. I understand about power seating. And he lines us up on this side. The sunlight is coming through the Venetian blinds, and we've got these stripes on our face, and I'm like, oh shit, this looks like prison.
Wow.
And this occurs to me. So when the chancellor comes into the room and he's seated, Miss Danise Jones stands up, politely closes the blinds, and I take a different seat. I sit at the other end and ask permission of our chair if I could speak on behalf of the students represented here, where I proceeded to ask the chancellor, this is my style, query the chancellor, did we do the due diligence? Has everything been done in decency and in order as we agreed to fall, da-da-da-da-da-da-da? And of course he acknowledged it. And I said, so why is the money have not been released? And he was saying that was his prerogative. not to release it because he has a concern. And I did exactly what you did. I tilted my head and I said, Chancellor, would you care to share what your concern is? And he did. And essentially he said his concern was that of all the student groups, the Black Student Union is the only one who made a profit on their concert. And so something was amiss. Something was wrong. He just couldn't figure out what was wrong. Because, for instance, the Student Government Association, Dan, my good friend, he had Grand Funk Railroad, another band, real popular, so on and so forth. And they didn't make any money. So I indicated to the chancellor a couple of things. I'm not going to share with you the explicative that I shared with the chancellor. But what I did share with the chancellor was having a concern is legitimate. Why didn't it occur to you to meet with us to raise your concern? Why did you assume immediately that something malfeasant had to be occurred? I use the term malfeasant, that blew his mind, had to have occurred. So what I said to him was, I did not go into the details of the contract because I immediately realized why nobody else made money, because everybody else actually got pimped, except for us. But what I did share with him, given that this is a legal and binding contract, given that we have done everything that we are supposed to do, I would recommend, and I pointed to the ceiling because his attorneys was on the floor above, I said, I would recommend that you consult with your attorneys and that the money be released by 5 p.m. today, or we're going to take you to court for breach.
Power move.
Well, the brothers, because I'm the only sister on the executive committee, the brothers is like, damn, Tish. And we leave, and they were like, and at that point, I indicate to the chancellor, I tell the brothers, we can all stand up and leave because this meeting is now adjourned. Our request has been made, and we get up and leave. So we go outside, and the students are all there, and they're like, what happened, and so on and so forth. I said, right now, we're good. The chancellor has until 5 o'clock to do what he needs to do. We're good. You all go ahead and do your thing, but this is how we were going to communicate in case we didn't get what we wanted, what we were going to do. And of course, campus security and all that is watching this because of all what's going on around the country. Well, I am so thrilled to tell you that at 5 p.m., the money was released. Ball game. So that's my leadership kind of style thing. So, moving on. I know you're going to go to the next part of my life. I began to work for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA.
Wow.
I started at their facility in Greenbelt, which is not far from the University of Maryland College Park.
My parents used to live there.
Okay. And so I now work there in the Scientific, Technical, and Information Facility. The girl who loves libraries. In fact, what I failed to mention is my part-time job I had two. While I was going to high school, I worked at the library in Bowie, Maryland. So I go there working for NASA. That's a whole nother trip, but I'm organizing again. And we'll talk about that, but I want to get to another place here. So I go to work for NASA, and they relocate their facility to BWI Airport, which made perfect sense because they're actually near NSA. They are near other military installations. So, rather than my making the drive from Prince George's County to Glen Burnie every day, I decide to relocate and I move to Glen Burnie. And so again, I am in segregated, racist Glen Burnie, Maryland. But the energy is different because the energy of segregation in the late 50s, early 60s is different. Now it's more subtle, it's covert.
Mm-hmm.
But I moved to, like I said, to Glen Burnie, specifically Millersville, In fact, the apartment that I lived in, which was a subsidized apartment, is now a gated community. That's how awesome these apartments was. That's another story, but it's organizing again. I moved there, and I feel isolated from the African American community. Radio again. So I'm in my apartment doing my thing, and I'm trying to get to WHUR radio.
Howard, yeah.
Howard University Radio. Couldn't pick up the signal. I'm playing around with the dial, and I land on WEAA radio. And I'm like, what is this? And so I'm like, let me start listening to this. You know, this is going to be my salvation for when I come home from work, and I want to do this, that, and the third. So I'm listening to WEAA, and I'm now attached to it. So may I share with your listeners what's going on? Okay. Yeah. So what's going on is, with WEAA, I learned that the letters stand for We Educate African Americans. And I'm like, whoa, that is deep. I learned quickly that I was not going to hear rhythm and blues like I was listening to on WOL. But I'm now being introduced to this next genre of music, next expression of blues and gospels and all of that. Not hip hop yet. So I'm saying, I'm liking this music, like George Duke, for instance. I'm liking this, I'm getting this work done, I can do this, so on and so forth. But what I was really liking was my favorite radio program was Two-Way Talk. Love Two-Way Talk because it gave me an opportunity to be in conversation without being conversational, to listen, to learn, and then eventually I learned how to call in and so on and so forth. But to listen and learn the same information but from my perspective, because again, whoever controls the narrative controls the perspective, controls your story. So I'm listening to Kwesi Mfume. Later on, I'm listening to Sean Yos. Later on, I'm listening to and loving until the day he transitioned was Anthony McCarthy. Loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. But in addition to that, I'm now also listening to people like Mary Carter Smith, the griot. I didn't know what a griot was. I didn't know about the oral history and tradition of storytelling done by African Americans. So I am totally intrigued and programmed on Saturdays to listen to Mary Carter Smith. Another person who had a segment, her name is Morning Sunday, and she would talk about activities, African-centric activities. She would talk about how to eat differently, how to dress differently, how to entertain yourself differently, and I enjoyed listening to that. And then last but certainly not least, now I definitely did the gospel programming because I needed that for my spiritual uplift. But last but not least, I listened to Big Jim. Oldies but goodies, okay? Definitely listen to that. So I'm listening to the radio station. It's speaking to me, but it's speaking to me in an authentic, I'm receiving it authentically because it's not commercial radio. And I'm aware, critical thinking again, I'm aware of the fact that it's not commercial radio, which means it's not necessarily telling me or exposing me to what's popular, exposing me to what could be popular or what is. So as my own financial picture changed, I definitely contributed to the radio station because in my mind, self-determination, you got to pay for what you want. You know, you're not looking for somebody else to provide this for you. You pay for it. So that was a no-brainer for me. So I participate, and I'm a donor to the radio station.
And you have been since, this is around 77, 78?
From the jump, honey. So when I would give $25 back in those days, that was big money, okay? And I'm like, girl, can you afford $25? And I did. But then as time went on and my financial picture changed, then I continued to expand, what my donations would be. And as of today, I'm now a sustainer. And I'm proud to be a sustainer, and I'm proud to assist with helping promote the message of, this is our radio station. We need to support our radio station. And which I understand has been very, very effective.
Can I pause for 1 second
Sure.
and say, I'm just really struck by this image. You've moved and relocated to a new part of Maryland that is segregated. Even in spite of the passage of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, it's segregation it's been shifted. It's a different form. And I hope that you can speak a little bit more to how, despite the passage of that legislation, segregation persisted. But across the boundaries of race, across boundaries of class, the radio is able to transcend those boundaries. You're receiving Black culture, Black history, Black life, information from this public radio station across boundaries of race. Speak a little bit more to the power of radio to communicate, to the power of Black radio to reach its audience, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. There's a couple of things. The nature of radio, the structure of radio, means that it's not limited geographically. So the magic of radio is that it's not limited geographically. So let me go back in time in the 20th century when radio becomes popular in the 30s. So in the 30s, you're in Commerce, Georgia, in your living room because you have a radio, and you might be a Black sharecropper or a white small farmer, dirt farmer. You can hear what Cafe Society is doing in New York via the radio. So the technology of radio transcends geography. And so you can be exposed to whatever you want to be exposed to. So that's very, very important to me. Now, let's talk about Black radio. Culturally, Black radio is important because I have an opportunity to be deeply exposed to my culture, my music, my heritage. That's why Black radio is important. Black radio is also important because if you are a young lion trying to make the grade, get in, Black radio will afford you that opportunity that you will not get with other radio stations at that time and even now. Because commercial radio is based on the profitability. It's not based on whatever. So that's why Black radio is so important. Black radio is also so important, again, because of the news message. The news perspective, I'm interested in a deep dive in that news perspective. And how does that relate to African American people? What is it that we would be interested in knowing about this particular incident, and so on and so forth? So I would like to put my comment on the table for a moment, because I want to go back to your question about 1968 Fair Housing Act passes. How is it that we still have segregated communities? That is such an excellent question that took me maybe 40 years to have the answer. The answer is that the structures that are in place to enable persons to purchase a home, the structures disadvantage an African American buyer. So unless those structures are changed, and those structures are financial structures primarily, unless those financial structures change, then you cannot purchase the house of your dreams because the financial structures are not efficacious. They're equal, but they're not efficacious.
They're not accounting for the history of racism and what the impacts of that were.
Exactly, and it doesn't believe that it needed to either. Because what I do want to make sure that folks recognize is that in 2025, my critical thinking tells me that the majority of people in America and in the world have a good heart. What we don't recognize is that the structures that we've created do not achieve the outcomes that we're seeking. And unless we become smart about revisiting the structures that we have created, we will never be able to achieve what it is we desire to achieve. Mm-hmm. An example, if I might bring this to the current 21st century. Mm-hmm. The president was elected by the majority of people. I believe that the majority of people did, in fact, vote for the president. I don't believe there was any hanky-panky or craziness. And they voted for the president based on the outcomes that they personally were seeking. What they didn't recognize was the structures that were in place and what that impact would be regarding outcomes.
Sorry, please go on.
Okay. And so those structures, and we'll use immigration as an example. Folk had no idea that long-time, decent, law-abiding, built their family immigrants were going to be booted out of the country. Because what they didn't recognize was when folks were discussing, we're going to eject the criminals, nobody asked, okay, what's the process? How are we going to do this? And so the structure that was in place did not discriminate between those two groups of people. So we have the madness that we're having right now. Mm-hmm. And I hope that history will, when folks are looking at this, hearing this interview, I hope that in the future we will learn that folks are going to revisit this structure and restructure it for fairness as well as safety. So in the whole housing reality, but now there's another piece, because it's interesting we're talking about housing, mm-hmm. because a lot of my community work centers around housing development.
Yes.
And it centers around housing development for community. So what I'm doing now is I am part of the Community Land Trust movement, which provides safe, decent, market rate housing at affordable prices. And so I'm very excited about that. And in fact, as a part of community and part of a community group, just lay people, neighbors, saying we don't like the fact that our neighbors are being overhoused with their money. They work hard and they still can't get a safe, decent place. That's a whole nother story. We can talk about knee-high at another time. But I am the current chair for the Northeast Housing Initiative. And we have in our portfolio 42 homes that have been rehabbed, market standards, and that they are occupied by working families at a rate that is affordable. And we did this within the existence of the current financial structures. So that's why I'm so aware of the fact that the structure makes homes unaffordable. What do I mean? I got to tell you this. Yeah. Although they have me on radio here on a tape, you can hear it as well. But I have to tell you this. And I want to talk about Anne Arundel County, which is where Glen Burnie is located. White people probably don't realize that they are being economically discriminated against big time. You could work for Northrop Grumman and your salary could be $80,000 per annum at Northrop Grumman, and you have good credit. So you should be able to purchase a home. The home that you want to purchase, the most you can get is 3 times your gross rate. So the home, 3 times 8 is what? 24? So the most house that you could buy is $240,000. New construction in Anne Arundel County is starting at $300,000. You can't buy a house.
People can't afford this.
But that's all artificial. And let me tell you why it's artificial. Because the investment side of the bank is telling the developer contractor, we're not going to invest in any project unless the sell price is $350,000. So everybody's in a quagmire. So again, we as a people have to look at structures to understand how they're structured. Do those structures work in our interest or do they not work in our interest? I'm sure a year ago, if farmers in Nebraska and Arkansas knew that the shutting down of USAID was going to affect them in the way that it did, they would have been saying no, no, and hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Had no idea. Because you have to understand the structure. Saying that you were going to deport all immigrants indiscriminately, if the farmers in Nebraska and Arkansas and Tennessee knew that that meant that their workers were going to be gone and therefore affect their ability to even achieve the level of product that they are accustomed to, they would have said no, no, hell no. So the key is that listeners, your listeners, the listeners for this, when I'm speaking to you in the 23rd century, that you'll know that you must always look at your structures. But the good news is this: structures are man-made, which means they can be dismantled and restructured in your interest. So how does WEAA relate to what I just talked about? WEAA provides an opportunity to have this discussion, a deep dive. In fact, several years ago, when Faraji Muhammad was here, another show that I enjoyed, he actually interviews me to discuss what is a community land trust, what are the housing challenges, what are the structural issues that you saw. You're not going to get that on commercial radio, but you will get that kind of conversation on public radio. And in the case of the HBCU, you will get the black perspective on that question on a black radio station. So for instance, public radio, WYPR, WAMU, they're going to allow that kind of discussion. But what WEAA provides is an opportunity to have that discussion. And what does that mean specifically for African American people?
Narrative control and perspective matters.
Absolutely.
It's important. Do I have just a few more minutes with you? Is that okay?
I thought that I had ran over time.
You're okay.
Am I clear?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So that is exactly what I was going to say, is like the social, political, and economic issues of today, that you are talking about are made accessible and are informing the people through HBCU radio, through WEAA.
Correct.
So I guess what I do want some specifics in terms of what are the programs of recent vintage that you are calling into and that matter to you. Who are you listening to, and who is helping to shape that news and information that you are receiving?
Oh, that is very easy. I listen to Dr. K. So I definitely listen to Dr. K. Whitehead, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And then Driana, the Morgan News Hours. That is just absolutely, absolutely imperative for me to listen to both of those. And here's why. Both of those personalities also educate. So what they will do is they will state the problem issue, they will support it with fact, they will clearly identify when it's their perspective, and will invite you to call in and share your take on the same matter. They will also invite you to do what I call critical thinking. So Danise, don't just call in and say X, Y, and Z about a particular item. Share what that's grounded in. What are the facts? What is your understanding? How that's grounded? So I absolutely enjoy listening to both of their programs. And I do learn. And I'm also exposed to content experts that I may not have ever heard before. So that's what they do. I definitely listen to Mikhail Hunter. And I will tell you that the reason why I'm so interested in her programming is because of the Student Learning Lab. She provides African American students the opportunity to become excellent in this craft, and that the best way to become excellent is to be hands-on, to actually do this work. And so one of the things she encourages her students to do is to develop clips and about different issues that are important to them, or it might be a little bit about Black history or so on and so forth. She invited me to co-host with her during the fundraising drive, and one content expert that she brought was Robert Ginyard, who has his own podcast, but he's addressing the issue of prostate cancer in men. Why is WEAA important? Because his perspective is Black men, this is how it affects you. This is the taboo that we've experienced in becoming a man that keeps us from taking care of ourselves. So again, the control of the narrative and the impact on a very specific audience is so important. You'll get that at WEAA. You may not necessarily, you will get the prostate cancer discussion globally, but you're not going to hear the barriers specifically for a Black man.
Thank you for that. Can you speak to some specific moments in history, recent history, such as COVID and the pandemic, or even go back to 9/11, where listening to WEAA actually helped you stay informed and gave you the vital information you needed to proceed in your day?
I'm going to go back to COVID, only 5 years ago. And in fact, I can go back to 2019. Dr. K started talking about COVID. We weren't quite clear what it was. She was trying to understand what it was. She was bringing people on the air. She even had the head of the CDC come in and talk about it as he's beginning to consider what is going on. And so she raised the concern on her program before it even had a name, okay? And she raised what we need to be considering and doing as we try to understand this milieu and why we needed to understand it. Because the other thing that Dr. K was able to help us remember is that health disparities suggest that if African Americans are affected, they're going to be effective more severely than other groups of people because of structural health disparities. So I'm listening to her intently, and I'm listening to her because I wanted to also understand the genesis. My elder son, I have two sons, and my elder son lives in Japan, and he's an educator there and an entrepreneur in Japan. And I wanted to understand what was happening in the Asian theater and how that may or may not affect him and my grandson and my daughter. So, and I was planning to cruise the Panama Canal. So I wanted to understand what was going on. So again, listening to WEAA radio even raised my consciousness that you really need to understand what's going on and how it could be impacting you. There was little to nothing on the news other than something was happening in China and folks couldn't figure it out, and that was it. But there was no connecting to, you need to think about this because it could affect you. And Dr. K was providing that opportunity. And I become very aware. And in fact, when my son advised me that they were going to celebrate Christmas in Singapore, I'm like, okay, these are all the things you got to know and so on and so forth. And he's like, Ma, stop. I said, no, Ma's not going to stop. And then when I'm returning from my cruise in Panama, this is deep, because I've been watching the news and watching the impeachment of the president and so on and so forth. And I hear that cruise ships on the Pacific coast were being sequestered. I said, oh shit, I got home just in time. But WEAA helped me to understand COVID. The next thing the WEAA did was it helped to promote what we should be doing in spite of the health disparities. So structurally, there's a health disparity. African American community, these are the things that you need to embrace. Get the mask. When the vaccine is available, do the vaccine. You've got to rethink how you live because we live in community and you can't do that. Mm-hmm. So then March the 15th, 2020 happens. We are sequestered. And I live alone. I'm a widow and I live alone. My lifeline was WEAA radio. So I'm now listening to this. I'm serious. I'm listening to this station 24/7. Music, the conversation. So I'm still in community, although I'm sequestered and isolated.
Yeah. That's incredible that the service provided and the two-way flow of information. Can you give me just a sense of how you, as a dedicated, invested listener for so long, have seen the evolution of this station, how it's changed, how leadership may have changed? Mm-hmm. What have you noticed along the way?
What I've noticed is a couple of things. What has not changed is the quality. There is a strong commitment to the highest possible quality of music and information coming to us. What has changed is the technology. So there is a commitment to state-of-the-art technology so that the quality of what's coming across the airwaves, remains the same. There is a commitment to understanding communication and journalism, hence the school. So I'm really excited about that. And WEAA is a part of that tradition. So I'm excited about that. What has changed is the amount of listeners. So the amount of listeners is constantly expanding, and I'm very, very excited about that. What has also changed is there's more of a commitment now than it was initially for students to have this hands-on experience. That's why I'm a patron, because I am thrilled with students having this hands-on experience with state-of-the-art equipment. So when it's time for them to join the broader world of communications, their resume is competitive. My father again, education provides you with a competitive edge as you compete to be a part of the economy. So what else have I seen? Oh, and the number of women, female personalities. So the WEAA is open to participation from folks of all hues and gender to be a part of this radio station. And so that's very important. So women are definitely getting more of an opportunity to be, on mic in front, but also behind the scenes as well. So that's exciting for me.
Do you remember the first time you heard a woman's voice on this station?
Oh, well, yeah, that's Mary Carter Smith.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I love that. So that's a long time ago, but yes, I love that. But there were other women, like on the gospel programming, Mary Carter Smith. I cannot call sister's name right now.
Ernestine?
No, not Ernestine. Okay. No, I'm the general manager. And I'm seeing her face, and I cannot. She's gonna kill me. I cannot call her name, but Ernestine though is a person. Going to Ernestine Jones, she is a complete delight, and very, very committed to this station, and the work that she does. Her work holds up our historic tradition because she really emphasizes quartet music. She emphasizes, old-time gospel and so on and so forth. And that's a good thing, so that we remember, you got to know the roots of the tree. You can't just look at the fruit and the leaves. You got to know the roots. But Mary Carter Smith definitely, she was the GM, and I cannot think of her name. And I'm looking right at her.
That's okay. If it comes back, just go ahead and interrupt and name it. That's okay.
Okay.
Just because we are running short on time, I am really interested in the work that you did with the city of Baltimore, right? As part of the housing authority.
Oh, somebody told you that story.
I did a little bit of research.
Okay. Let me share. Let me be excited and share about that with you. I worked for the first elected African American mayor for the city of Baltimore, Kurt L. Schmoke, and it was a delight to work for him because he was visionary and also pragmatic. As a visionary, he gave me an opportunity, as long as I did not raise his political risk, to try different kinds of things or address different kinds of issues on his behalf and the citizens of Baltimore. So I actually worked as Kurt Schmoke's special assistant, and I had various assignments, of which the Housing Authority of Baltimore City was an assignment. And this was at a time when the authority was absolutely, positively deplorable. It was its infrastructure, its actual buildings, and so on and so forth were in bad shape. Its staff, beleaguered staff, was also disheartened, and the money was not making any sense. And I had an opportunity to share with the mayor's chief of staff at that time, Ms. Lynette Young, who was an amazing, amazing chief of staff here and in Atlanta, that I was willing to go to the authority with two things. One, the buck stopped with the mayor. So talking about the historic disinvestment and neglect, nobody wanted to hear that. So the buck stopped with the mayor, and that in that regard, if she and the mayor agree, I, along with another gentleman, Mr. Emmanuel Manny Price, who everybody loves, was willing to go to the Housing Authority of Baltimore City to address the concerns. And we did. In fact, we did a 6-month turnaround, a dramatic turnaround. And that turnaround, the goal was to reorganize the authority, support the staff who's doing this difficult work, support our customer who lived on those properties, who was spending more than 30% of their income to live there, to provide them with the kind of customer service that they deserved. So that was my role going to the authority. How did you do what you did? Because if you looked at the newspapers, they were like, she's a nice lady, but she has no property management experience. How is she going to make this happen?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. How did you handle that criticism?
Okay. So the way you handle that criticism, as my father would have said, is you don't respond. You just get busy doing what you got to do. I acknowledged that I did not have property management experience. But we're going to do what we have to do. So what that meant for me was to understand what was the issue, critical thinking again, but structurally, how did we get there? What was getting in the way of doing the right thing? Because not one person that I met who worked for the authority, who provided funding for the authority, not one person was opposed to the authority turning around. So that told me immediately, structurally, something's going on to keep this thing from happening. So in order to turn this around in 6 months, I had to declare an executive emergency and began to move in an executive manner to get certain things in place. Now, of course, I did this with counsel, legal counsel, provided advice. With the staff, I looked at what the barriers were and began to work on addressing those barriers. I was able, because of my work with the Rainbow Coalition, I had a relationship with then Secretary Cisneros, and I was able to ask the Secretary to, within all the rules, but to be supportive of Baltimore as we moved forward. And the Secretary came over to look at the situation with me, and he pledged his support to me. We did not receive extraordinary money. What we received was how to manage that money differently in order to get to our goal. So again, the bottom line was structurally what was in the way of getting the job done. Hence, when you began to remove those barriers, the staff now feels that their good hard work has value and merit, because you're not knocking yourself out to run into a wall and you can't do anything and you feel helpless and hopeless and so on and so forth. But what I also did was controversial, and I knew it was going to be controversial. So when invited to consider becoming the permanent head of the authority, politically I made the decision to say no. I knew that you could find good people to manage what the structural changes, but that we did not want the structural changes to become an issue. What are you talking about, Danise? Two things. The first issue was safety. Safety on the campuses and safety in the communities surrounding the campuses. The Housing Authority had a police department. The question is, how could we work with the Housing Authority Police Department, the Baltimore City Police Department, and security in such a way that we secured the properties without disrespecting the primary residents, which would have been African American people.
I mean, this is a big question within policing studies and policing history.
Okay. And so the issue is, so the issue that faced me was, who are the people that the customer would respect and not give difficulty to? And so I knew that the people would be the brothers that I see on the street who greet people and folks give them respect. The brothers who, when they go over to you and they say, man, you don't want to do this. Those were the people that I needed to be a part of the security team. And they did become part of the security team. And guess what? Within a month, the crime on my properties, campuses, dropped 50%. And in the surrounding community, the deputy for operations Baltimore City Police Department deputy, Eugene Tansmore, said, Ms. Dorsey, they have dropped 30% in the perimeter. And because he was very skeptical about my approach, but he reported back as he would have very honestly what was going on. So now folks are feeling safe. The next thing that I needed to do, and I specifically call them campuses and not properties because it connotes in the mind a different sense of the geography. So in calling them campuses, we participated in an extraordinary community housing operation. We called it Operation Echo. And we modeled it against Chicago's Operation Clean Sweep, which I went to view, have pictures in the whole bit. And so what we did was we reorganized each building where you had to check in like you would at a 5-star hotel, and you had your own little badge and so on and so forth. You couldn't get in automatically. And the other thing that we did was when we went into each building, every outstanding maintenance issue that was happening, it was addressed that day. And then because I love flowers, we planted flowers. And the wrought iron fences that you see around the city, those wrought iron fences, I insisted had to be on the perimeter of the properties, which gave this gated community look so that folks would think differently about where they live. As a result of all that work, vacant apartments were now occupied. Still didn't address the tremendous need, but they were now occupied. And so the financial picture changed dramatically. Where we were projecting being in the red, we were actually in the black at the end of that fiscal year. I started this in January 1993, and I stopped June 30th, 1993.
My birthday.
Oh, okay.
There's so many questions.
Was that helpful?
Oh, it was. It was. And there are so many questions. We could talk about housing and the current climate forever. But let me move us to the end. Okay. And I'll just ask, as an active listener, as a dedicated, invested listener, is there anything that you would change about WEAA or that you would love to see them pursue? Which if I'm sure it's already your dream station, but if it could be even more, what would it take? What would it be?
What I would love it is my dream station now. I want to make sure that my dream station has state-of-the-art technology so that it can be heard globally. It was my thrill to be in Amsterdam and I could listen to WEAA via WEAA.org. I was too thrilled. So for my dream station, I would want a global audience. I would want that global audience to know that it was hearing the African American perspective on whatever issues that were facing the world. I would want, for instance, on climate, I would want folks to know that African Americans are very concerned about climate, as well as other people, that we're in solidarity with you. I would want my brothers and sisters in the Ukraine to know that we're in solidarity with you regarding this madness, and whatever we can do, we want to support you. So my dream station would have this global audience and could share our perspective. My dream station would have enough capacity to extend opportunities to more students. My dream station would be able to do paid internships. So that's definitely one of the things that I would want from my dream station. But I would want my dream station not to become commercial. This is an educatory lab as far as I'm concerned, state-of-the-art educational lab. So WEAA should remain non-commercial, definitely be public. Okay. Unlike WHUR, which I love, but WHUR essentially has become commercial and successful, and definitely provides for a funding stream to Howard University. But look at all the stuff that's been lost, because I never hear students on the air.
I don't think they can.
I can say that because I'm a listener. Yes, dear.
Just a couple more, and you're getting to it, but another thing that this administration is doing is cutting funding to public radio and to public media. The elimination of the effective elimination of the CPB and the funding that stations like WEAA rely on. Mm-hmm. So why do you think it matters that a group like us, the HBCU Radio Preservation Project, are coming to these stations and trying to preserve the histories of these stations to help them to maintain legacy, to tell their stories, to have control over their stories? Why does this project matter?
Well, let me say this. This project matters because history matters. Because, again, you must know the root in order to understand the fruit and the leaves of the tree. At some point in time, history also teaches us when humankind encounters an issue, history can teach you how did people before you address those issues and concerns. The other thing about this project, the reason why I took my time to be here to do this, is because the lessons and the stories need to be preserved so that someday when someone says, well, there's no such thing as black radio, we would be able to, in the 23rd century, say, oh, hold up, there really was black radio and this is what it looked like, and so on and so forth. So for me, the other reason why this is important is that whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. And what happens is, if you don't teach history, then you could easily be persuaded that a group of people had no value, made no contributions, and so on and so forth. You've got to know that what we've done has been very successful, that we've made contributions. But I'm going to tell you why this is also important. Self-determination and self-reliance. At some point in time, you have to control your own destiny financially. And what I'm excited about with the WEAA family of listeners is that whatever we can afford, we are contributing to keeping this station moving forward. So this project communicates why it's important to invest and to continue to invest. When I was on the radio when we were doing the fundraising and mentioned Mary Carter Smith, there were people like, I remember listening to her. My children listened to her. I made them listen to her in the car when we're driving. You will not know about a Mary Carter Smith if you're not if you did not have this project to tell you that story. Mm-hmm.
That's very well said.
Who pays for the project, though? How do you all get funded?
We are a Mellon-funded project.
Excellent. So I thank the Mellon family for doing that. And so the key is that as we grow in wealth as a community, we need to also remember to fund projects like this. I am participating in an audio-visual project where they want to tell my story as a community organizer after the Freddie Gray incident. What did I do? What was I doing? And so on and so forth. And so those stories are important to tell that story.
Well, what were you doing?
Basically, at that time, I was the executive director for My Brother's Keeper, which was a standalone. And because my board of directors are well-meaning folks, and I think everybody on the board was, except for two ladies, were white. Good-hearted people, caring people. And when the Freddie Gray situation occurred, school shut down. And they were afraid for my safety. And so they reached out to me and, like Miss Dorsey, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I thanked them for their concern. And I said, we're going to keep My Brother's Keeper open. I am not afraid of my people. And the children in this neighborhood, because the schools are closed, they're going to need someplace to come and eat because we serve lunch during the day, right? And so I'm keeping My Brother's Keeper open unless the board chair directs me that I have to close it. And of course, the board chair and the board president was not going to say that to me. So the key there was to maintain resources as people began to sort through what was happening with the Freddie Gray issue.
Yeah, you helped nourish the community as it expressed its rage. Right?
Exactly. But the other pieces are, after this uprising occurs, work still has to occur. And that's where I'm involved with structural issues again. What are the structural issues that led to a Freddie Gray? My church, St. Gregory the Great, my church at the time, the Archdiocese has closed it now, but my church at the time, St. Gregory the Great, it probably was only a half a mile from Ground Zero. And being an active member of the church, being active with our priest, Father Damien Nalepa, what do we do there to support the community as they experience the uprising? Because everybody who was geographically in the space was not participating in the uprising. Mm-hmm. So there's fear, concern about their own safety and all that has to be addressed. And who is going to be part of the team that communicates what this uprising really represents in the days to follow? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that I do.
Okay, I just want to give you a chance to talk about your late husband, who he was and what he did.
Oh, bless your heart. His name was Roger Charles Dorsey. When he died, he was still working, so he died with his boots on. And he had become the vice president for human resources for the Maryland Stadium Authority. I met Roger Dorsey when I worked for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. He was my peer supervisor, who I just wrote him off as, he is too bourgeois for me, in my 60s mode, right?
Yep.
It was only within 6 months that I recognized how intelligent this man is. Intelligent, introspective, and incisive. And I fell in love. I was like, oh my God. So as time went on, he liked the idea that I was a strong woman, incisive as well. And so we became friends. And what I know about Roger Dorsey that I eventually became very aware of, he grew up in a military family. So he moved from different communities. His mother loved going to these different neighborhoods and communities, on this coast. His father was in the Navy, and post World War II, and Roger had an opportunity because he was going to different schools. He had an opportunity to develop his social IQ, which was off the chart. He was able to meet you, talk with you, make an assessment that was probably 90% accurate, work with you to take you to another level. And I was so taken with that. And his ability to demonstrate respect and care for people, demonstrate his ability to understand where you are, help you articulate your vision as it relates to a career and move forward was amazing. He was also just an amazing human being. Our friends just absolutely was just taken with Roger. He was always helpful. He was always supportive. Bright, a hard worker, a storyteller. He would keep all of us entertained with stories over and over and over again.
Did he listen to WEAA as well?
He listened to whatever Danise had on the radio, right? But he liked WEAA because he loved the music part of it. Mm-hmm. And he was very progressive in his musical taste. So for instance, Ashford and Simpson is popular on radio. Rhythm and blues pieces would play this song. Commercial radio would play that song. But he would say to me, but Danise, come and listen to this song. And I'm like, wow. He was the one that was telling me, Nick is a lyricist, and this is what this means. And listen to what Val is doing with the keyboards. And I'm like, wow. And he taught me how to listen to the music that I was listening to on WEAA differently. Hence, another favorite program for me is Masterclass with Robert Shaheed, because he continues the provenance for me, as well as exposing me to the young lions, people who I had never heard of. Like a Samara Joy, who won a Grammy. I'm like, damn. So Roger definitely listened to WEAA with me, but he listened to it differently and taught me how to listen to that. And the reality is, what he showed me was what WEAA would play in terms of the music side is not something that I would hear on other stations. Now, what he would do is he would also tape what he was listening to, and then when he's driving, he would have his drive music that he had gotten from listening to WEAA. He would make his own CDs, and that would be what he would listen to if I wasn't with him.
Wow.
Roger Dorsey is absolutely amazing. The other thing about Roger Dorsey is that he was very supportive of me, so that in my community organizing, I could take risks without anybody trying to pull purse strings. And bless his heart, even to this day, I'm comfortable. And he provided for that comfort. And I knew I was going to be doing my thing, which I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's Roger Dorsey. Absolutely.
And I'm sure you taught him quite a bit as well around how certain things work in the world and in your communities.
Well, I don't know. He would be the person, quite frankly, that I would go to and say, Roger, blah, 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 blah. And he would say, sit down, Danise, think. And then I would settle down and start doing the critical thinking. And I'm like, oh, Roger, yeah, that kind of thing.
It's a beautiful partnership. Well, I know that we can't get to everything in an oral history interview, but if there's anything else that you think needs to be mentioned about your life or about WEAA, I want to give you that opportunity.
The only thing that I would mention is, I would just reiterate that each of us are a member of community, and that being a member of community, we are required. It's not a choice. It is our obligation to add to the wealth and beauty of the communities that we're a part of. My contribution to adding to that wealth and to that beauty and to that future is supporting WEAA radio station, where we control the narrative, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and therefore it informs our ability to add to the wealth, the beauty, and the future of our community.
Well, Miss Danise Jones-Dorsey, it's been an absolute honor to hear your story, to think through some of these substantive issues with you, and to understand the impact and role that WEAA has played in your life. I thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity and the honor. And if there's any way that I can let the Mellon family know, that foundation know that we are thrilled that they're funding this project, please, let me know that after this interview, because I think it's important that funders know how much this work is appreciated. Absolutely.
I absolutely will. Thank you.
All righty.